I was betrayed and almost lost everything. How I turned pain and manipulation into real victory. I never imagined someone so close could become my greatest enemy. I sensed something wrong, but I never thought it was so deep, so calculated. My heart felt like a relentless drum every time she walked into the room, always with that smile I now recognize as manipulative. The arguments began subtly, with words that seemed like jokes, but carried a silent venom. I was Rogerio, 38 years old, married for 12 years, living a life that, in everyone's eyes, was perfect. Camila was my wife, the mother of my children, or at least that's what I thought. Waking up every day feeling like I was being used corroded something inside me, but at the same time, I felt incapable of confronting the truth. She was so convincing, so full of charm, that any suspicion seemed like paranoia. Deep down, I knew something was wrong when I realized my financial decisions were being questioned with that loving concern, always accompanied by a calculating look I couldn't decipher. The realization came one Friday night when Bruno, a mutual acquaintance, urgently called me to talk. I had no idea he held the key to the whole truth. Hearing what he had to say, I felt my body freeze, my hands tremble, and a mixture of disbelief and anger wash over me. Camila and Rafael were plotting a scam. The entire marriage, all the trust I had placed in them, was being manipulated to take it all away from me. I felt like I was falling off a building without a parachute. My mind was spinning, every memory of affection, every gesture of love, now carrying a shadow of manipulation. I felt like an idiot, a man who believed until the last second that everything was fine, and now realized he had been used as a pawn in a game of power and money. In those days, sleep was impossible. Every time I closed my eyes, I replayed scenes of what Bruno had told me. Camilla's calculating smile, Raphael's cold gaze, the detailed plans to take financial advantage. My body was exhausted, but my mind wouldn't rest. I tried to confide in my mother, Nade, and there I found my only anchor amidst the storm. She listened to me without interruption, holding my hand, her eyes full of understanding. It was as if each word she spoke was a thread of hope holding me together, keeping me from losing myself completely in despair. I felt anger, yes, but also a deep sadness. The pain of realizing that the love I believed to be genuine had been nothing more than a carefully constructed sham. For days, I walked around the house feeling like every room had witnessed my naivete. The sofa where we argued, the kitchen where we laughed, now felt like pieces of a play I wasn't a part of. I found myself wondering, how did I not realize it before? How did I trust so much? Anger grew, but so did fear. Fear of what might happen if she discovered I knew the truth. Fear of judicial manipulation. Fear of social judgment. Fear of becoming just another victim. Every step I took at work, every interaction with friends was accompanied by a weight on my chest, as if I were carrying the world alone. The feeling of betrayal hurt more than anything else. It wasn't just money, it was dignity, trust, what I believed to be the core of my life. And then came the point where I realized fear could no longer paralyze me. I needed to act, but act intelligently, silently, strategically. I decided to transfer all my assets to a legal trust, a barrier that would make any attempted coup impossible. The decision cost me sleepless nights, document analysis, and meetings with lawyers. But for the first time, I felt I had some control, that I wasn't just a pawn, that I could still fight for my life, for my dignity. I was determined, even with a heavy heart, to prove I could face this without losing my essence. The feeling was bittersweet, fear and relief mixed together, as if I was finally breathing and feeling the air weigh down. The following days were a minefield of tension and silence. Camila began to sense something had changed, and her frustration was palpable. Every message that arrived on my phone, every call, carried an almost aggressive expectation of control. My body felt tense all the time, as if I needed to be ready to react to any move. The anger was still there, but it had been mixed with a determination I'd never experienced before. I could no longer allow myself to be manipulated. Every step I took had to be calculated, as if I were walking on broken glass. The fear of making a mistake and giving her an opening kept me awake late into the night. I began mentally writing down every possible strategy, scenario, and response, analyzing every detail. The feeling of being in a constant psychological war was overwhelming. It wasn't just about money, it was about who controlled the narrative, who would set the terms, pride and dignity. At times, I felt like everything could fall apart. I remembered the nights I trusted blindly, and that betrayed trust crushed me. I cried alone, sitting on the porch, feeling the cold wind on my face, wishing it were all a nightmare I could wake up from. My body reacted to the tension with chest pain and extreme exhaustion. My mother, Nade, remained my rock, always reminding me that I wasn't alone and that I didn't need to be ashamed of the pain I felt. I realized that vulnerability wasn't weakness, but rather a silent strength that allowed me to seek help, reflect and prepare for what was to come. Memories of happy times with Camilla were now accompanied by a pang of bitterness, but they also reminded me of what I could still protect, my dignity and my peace of mind. The turning point didn't come with a grand gesture, but with an internal decision. I would no longer be held hostage by her manipulation. I began to reorganize my routine, taking small actions that symbolized my reconstruction. I began to write my own rules, my own limits, and to put myself first for the first time in years. Each decision brought me a mix of fear and relief. Fear of her reaction, relief at finally feeling some control over my life. This sense of quiet power was almost addictive, but it also reminded me of the importance of acting cautiously. I learned that in psychological warfare, patience and strategy are worth more than any direct confrontation. Bruno continued to be an unexpected and pivotal presence. He provided me with details that confirmed everything I feared and more. The feeling of betrayal was overwhelming, but it also opened my eyes to the clarity I needed. Raphael, on the other hand, was cold and self-serving, a constant reminder that some people only appear to exploit weaknesses. I needed to digest this cruel reality while still maintaining my sanity. With each conversation, I felt my body react with a mixture of tension and determination, my stomach churning, but my mind more focused than ever. I began to realize that pain, however intense, could be used as fuel for rebuilding. The first small victories were silent. She tried provocations, but she could tell I wasn't falling into emotional traps. Each refusal to react impulsively was a silent victory. Each planned action a firm step in rebuilding my own emotional terrain. I felt my body relax a little with each achievement, though the tension never completely disappeared. The feeling of finally being able to control my own narrative brought me a clarity that had previously seemed impossible. I was learning to protect myself without losing my humanity, to be strategic without losing my feelings, to win without needing to crush. It was a fragile but necessary balance. And there, amidst all the pain, I began to sense there was a way out, a way to survive it all without losing my dignity. The psychological warfare reached its peak when Camilla realized I knew everything and that my actions were no longer predictable. Her every message was now filled with provocations and subtle blackmail. My body reacted with constant tension, my neck stiff, my palms sweaty. But I knew that to give in would be to lose not only to her, but to myself. For weeks, I spent sleepless nights reviewing documents, checking every detail, making sure everything was legally protected. It was a mixture of fear and power, fear of her reaction, power in knowing my defenses were intact. Each small victory, like her failed attempt to access my assets, brought immediate relief and a silent sense of justice. I felt my heart race, and at the same time, a secret peace washed over me as I realized she could no longer manipulate my life. At the same time, I was facing an almost paralyzing internal battle. I wondered if I would ever be able to trust anyone again, if the emotional trauma would ever give way to something lighter. Some mornings I woke with my body exhausted and my mind in tatters, remembering every detail of the manipulations, every fake smile. But there were also moments of clarity, small moments when I would take a deep breath, close my eyes, and remember that I still had choices. Every step I took was conscious. Every word spoken or unsaid carried a calculated intention. I felt my body react physically to the tension, my chest tight, my stomach churning, but also a growing, almost palpable determination that reminded me that I could still win without losing my essence. The rebuilding process was slow and painful. I began to regain control over my social life, my finances, and my daily routine, step by step. I learned to say no without guilt, to set clear boundaries, and to protect my emotional energy. Each decision was accompanied by a whirlwind of emotions, from guilt for distrusting someone to anger at being used. I realized that my actions weren't just about protecting material possessions, but also about rebuilding my self-esteem, confidence, and peace. Each time I felt exhausted, I remembered the sense of helplessness I felt at the beginning of my discovery, and that drove me to keep going. Bruno's involvement was crucial at times, especially when he needed to confirm details Camilla was trying to hide. He became more than an acquaintance. He became a silent ally, an anchor amidst the chaos. Knowing there was someone outside my family who could trust and see the situation clearly brought enormous relief. It was as if, little by little, the crushing weight was being lifted, allowing me to breathe easier and make more assertive decisions. His presence, even silently, gave me the strength to face direct confrontations, to resist provocations, and to keep my mind steady. And then came the point where I realized that war didn't need to be fought with verbal aggression or direct confrontation. I began to observe, plan, and respond only when necessary. Every silence became a weapon. Every calculated look or gesture had a greater effect than any argument. I felt my body slowly relax, the tightness in my chest lessening, the tension in my shoulders easing. The sense of silent control gave me strength and clarity. For the first time, I realized that overcoming didn't just mean defeating someone else, but also overcoming the very pain, anxiety, and fear that had consumed me since it all began. Over time, I realized that victory lay not only in the legal protection of my assets, but in the recovery of my own sanity. I could feel my body responding differently, less tension in my chest, less knots in my stomach, less uneasiness when I heard her name or remembered the plans that nearly destroyed my life. I began to allow myself small joys again, simple things like walking in the park, listening to music without thinking about strategies, and even smiling to myself without guilt. Each step showed me that reconstruction was possible, even after so much betrayal and manipulation. The most incredible thing was realizing that little by little I was regaining something I never thought I would lose. Self-confidence, the certainty that I could still choose my own life. It wasn't a linear process. There were days when anger and hurt returned, hitting like an unexpected wave. I found myself reliving moments of pain, remembering every fake smile and every manipulative word. My body reacted with tension, a chill down my spine, and my mind spun in circles. In those moments, I needed to turn to my mother, Need, or even Bruno, to talk, vent, and find clarity. I discovered that admitting vulnerability didn't weaken me. On the contrary, it strengthened me. Every tear shed, every outburst was part of the process of rebuilding myself, of not allowing the past to determine my future life. The hardest part was facing the feeling of personal betrayal. Knowing that someone I loved planned to use me was devastating, and even with all my care, fragments of pain and insecurity remained. But I began to realize that overcoming didn't mean forgetting, but rather learning to live despite the pain. I trained my mind to react rationally, to not let the ghosts of the past interfere with my choices. Each silent victory against fear and anxiety was more powerful than any direct confrontation. Little by little, I felt my body and mind align, less vulnerable, stronger. In the midst of this reconstruction, I allowed myself to resume personal projects that I had put aside due to my marriage and emotional distress. I learned to value my own time, my interests, and my achievements. I felt the freedom of being able to make decisions for myself without external manipulation. Each small action reinforced the feeling that I still had control over my life. My previously shaky self-confidence grew with each decision I made with clarity and awareness. I realized that what seemed like just a fight against other people was, in fact, an internal battle. And winning this battle brought a satisfaction that no victory over Camilla or Raphael could offer. The most important thing was realizing that even after so much pain, there was still room to rebuild healthy relationships and trust the right people. Bruno and my mother became pillars, showing that it's possible to find true support even when you feel betrayed by those closest to you. I learned that overcoming doesn't mean erasing the memory of pain, but learning to cope with it, using the experience to grow, and most importantly, protecting my own peace. Each step in rebuilding my emotional and practical life reminded me that strength lies not only in action, but in the decision not to let oneself be beaten down, to choose to live fully despite the scars. Looking back today, I realized that everything I experienced was painful, but necessary. I went through a time that nearly destroyed not only my possessions, but also my trust in myself and others. I learned that pain can be transformative when we decide to act with intelligence and courage. Every tear, every sleepless night, every tightness in my chest was part of a process that made me stronger, more aware, and more attentive to the people and situations around me. The feeling that I had lost everything was replaced by something much greater, the certainty that I can protect my life, my dignity, and my peace of mind. There are still memories that cut me to the core. Sometimes, a memory of Camilla's manipulative smile or Raphael's coldness surfaces unexpectedly and makes me tremble. But I've learned to breathe, observe my feelings without letting them dominate me, and move forward. I've discovered that true strength lies not in overcoming others, but in overcoming oneself, fear, anger, and the feeling of helplessness. Every day I wake up and manage to deal with the memory of betrayal without losing my composure is a silent but incredibly meaningful victory. I've finally understood that overcoming is not an endpoint, but an ongoing process. Rebuilding my practical and emotional life has brought me freedom. I've resumed personal projects, taken care of my physical and mental health, and rebuilt relationships with people who truly matter. I've learned to value family, true friendships, and my own company. The fear of trusting again still exists, but it no longer paralyzes me. I can choose who I entrust my trust and energy to. This freedom, which once seemed impossible to achieve, has become my most precious asset. I've discovered that even after profound betrayals, there is still a path to peace and personal growth. What motivates me today is the awareness that I'm no longer a victim of circumstances. I realize that every step I took toward rebuilding myself was a step toward regaining my self-esteem, clarity, and peace. The pain of the past hasn't completely disappeared, but I've learned to live with it healthily, using it as a learning experience. Today, I can view obstacles not as threats, but as challenges that taught me resilience. I not only survived, but was reborn amidst the chaos, stronger, more attentive, and more determined to live a true life without manipulation, without unnecessary fears, only with conscious choices. If I could leave a message for anyone going through something similar, it would be this: pain is inevitable, but destruction is not. There is always a way out, a path to rebuilding, even when all seems lost. Learning to protect yourself, trust yourself, set boundaries, and value those who truly matter are fundamental steps to overcoming any situation. Today, I have not only regained my life, but also my dignity and my hope. There is light after the darkness, even when manipulation and betrayal seem to dominate everything. I am living proof that it is possible to bounce back, even if the scars never completely disappear.